This is a 1975 Jaguar XJC, in this case a 6C. They made this two-door coupe version of their four-door sedans for 2 years only. This was the six-cylinder version. These are rare in that they only made them for a couple years. They weren't great sellers, and Jag abandoned it and went on with their four-door cars. They were made as the XJs were in that era in both the 12 and six-cylinder versions. Almost all automatics, certainly all the ones that came to the States were automatics as far as I know. And this is a six-cylinder, or was a six-cylinder version of this car. And we're changing that. We are going to put a V12 in it, but we're not going to put a V12 in it from the era. The last iteration of Jaguar's V12 was in the 90s, and it was a 6-liter with the updated high compression heads. Really the full evolution of that motor, very stable. The electronics are very stable, and it's bigger. It's a 6-liter. All the ancillaries are, of course, much more modern. Serpentine type belt drives, more modern, updated version of the engine. Also, in putting this 6-liter V12 in this car, we are going to be converting it to a 5-speed. As I said, most of these cars were automatics, certainly the ones that came to the States were. It was a Borg-Warner 3-speed automatic, awful transmission by modern standards. The Jag engines, it was, especially in the States, it was a common thing to pull the Jag 6 or the 12 and replace it with a small block Chevy, and in later years here, even LS swaps. Not something we're interested in doing, not something that we do. We're Euro car guys. We're going to do an engine swap, but it's going to be a 6-liter late model Jag V12, just to make it something unique. So we're going to convert it to a 5-speed. This involves using aftermarket bell housing and flywheels, and we're going to mate it to a late model 5-speed transmission, probably out of a Ford Mustang. This is the bell housing we have acquired. This has been cast and machined specifically for this to go on the back of the Jag V12 and accommodate a modern transmission mounts. The next aspect of this is not to just take a motor that we purchased somewhere and stuff it in here. We found a 1994 Jag XJ that had a 6-liter V12 in it, bought that car, we harvested the engine out of it, completely disassembled it. We're going to do a full build on this engine, completely disassembled and back up. And that means plating everything, every nut and bolt. Because we're restoration guys, we don't replace hardware. We use original hardware everywhere we can to maintain the uniqueness and the originality of the car. And that's true of this engine build. This is just some of the racks of parts we have for this engine. Every piece, every washer, every nut and bolt is taken down, cleaned, restored, and replated and prepared for the engine build and to go back. These engines are complicated. At their core, they're an awesome engine, but there's a lot of pieces, a lot of components that go with this, more so than most engine builds. The result is you have a lot of hands-on, a lot of work on individual parts and pieces have to be dealt with. Everything has to be stripped, cleaned, replated, painted before you ever get to the point of putting it back together or assembling the engine. Once we're done with this and we've mated this engine to a modern 5-speed, it'll go in. We don't have to do a lot of modification. The late model version, the 6-liter version of the Jag V12 is fundamentally the same engine from a dimensional point of view as the original flathead 5.3-liter Jag V12s, which was in these cars. So we should be able to put this in with relative ease without having to modify the chassis, which is really something we don't like to do. It should meet up with our motor mounts. It should meet up with our placement in the engine compartment. The only thing we're going to create is a carrier for the rear transmission support mid-chassis. That and a drive line to adapt to the rear. Other than that, we're not going to modify this car. It will be a swap, but not one that tears up and destroys a pretty cool low miles car. And it will keep it all Jaguar.